Well, next, we will go immediately into our conversation between Dr. Lori Benier and Mr. Mark Hickson from the Fuqua School of the Environment and NextEra Energy. And before they come to the stage, I'll give you a little bit of background on them. Dr. Lori Benier is the interim stand-back dean of the Fuqua School of the Environment, where she's a professor of energy economics and policy. She has secondary appointments at Duke's Department of Economics and the Sanford School of Public Policy, and her research focuses on the effectiveness of environmental policies, including disclosure laws, management-based regulations, liability regimes, and demand-side management programs. She's consulted with EPA offices, she's worked with the Administrative Conference of the United States, and she's served on the National Academies of Sciences consensus committees. Mr. Mark Hickson is the Executive Vice President of Corporate Development and Strategy at NextEra Energy, where he identifies and prioritizes top investment opportunities across the company, including corporate strategy, mergers and acquisitions, and related integration activities. He is also the Executive Vice President of Corporate Development and Strategy at NextEra Energy Partners, which is a growth-oriented limited partnership that acquires, manages, and owns contracted clean energy projects. And at NextEra Energy Partners, he's on both the board of directors and he's a general partner. So with that, please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mark, for joining us for this event. I'm sure we're going to learn an enormous amount from this session. I thought we might just start by having you talk a little bit about your role, both at NextEra Energy and NextEra Energy Partners, and the sort of arc of your career that led you to these particular roles.
Okay, happy to do that. Good morning, everyone. So I started, working at NextEra goes back probably 20 years, maybe more than 20 years. So I started at business school. I wasn't lucky enough to attend Duke University's business school, but I did attend business school, and I ended up working at Merrill Lynch on Wall Street. I was there from 1996 to 2012, and this is probably before a lot of you all will remember, but in the mid-90s, everyone wanted to work on telecom, media, and technology. We were hearing about Yahoo, we were hearing about Google, and in about 97, 98 time frame, which was 1 to 2 years after the deregulation of the utility sector, there was a wave of M&A transactions. And so I ended up working on one of the first M&A transactions that Merrill Lynch did. And as a result of that being one of the first for the firm, I immediately became the expert. So I ended up almost working on energy transactions by default. So from 1998 till 2012, I worked in the energy sector, and one of my clients became NextEra at the time. It was called FPL Group. A former CEO who just retired last year, he started at the company in 2001, and it was a good client of Merrill Lynch, and so we ended up doing a lot of work for them. In about 2004, he realized that where I grew up as a child, where I went to elementary school, junior high school, and high school, was 15 minutes from the company's headquarters. So, and I had never, when I left West Palm Beach, Florida at 17 years old, I was like, you know what, I'm never coming back. There's more to life, and so I went to Texas A&M, I worked at Boeing in Seattle, and then I came back to New York, and I never thought that I would be back in Florida. But starting in 2004, 2005, he started recruiting me, and I finally joined in 2012. It's the first time I know this picture's on the website. It's the first time I've seen it in a while. This is like 11 years ago. So I'm like, wow, I looked good back there. So, but I came on board in 2012, and my responsibilities at first were pretty kind of narrowly focused on M&A, because when I worked on Wall Street, I was in M&A the entire time. So for 15 years, I was in M&A. And my responsibilities have evolved over time. So I had probably 15 to 20 people when I first started, all doing corporate development, M&A strategy. And 2 years later, we took a second company public. And I always remember when I was on Wall Street, and it was in the late 90s and early 2000s, and Google went public, and I was watching them ring the closing bell, and I said, I want to do that someday. So it was pretty cool to do that in 2014. And then I ended up getting on the board of our second public company, which I'm still on the board. And so then I took over responsibility for all of the employees in that second publicly traded company. I've also taken responsibility for all of our insurance activities, which are about half self-insurance. We have $200 billion of assets, and the other half is we provide third-party insurance. And then my last thing, which is maybe in addition to corporate development and strategy, that might be near and dear to the hearts of the people in the room, is I have about 50 people that report to me that do a lot of the stuff that Breakthrough does, right? So we do seed, A round, B round, C round investing, because we started as a company about 11 years ago, and we realized, we started investing as a company 11 years ago, because we realized that new technologies were really going to influence our business. So we've been doing that for about 11 years. And so I have a really wide swath of just stuff that I work on. In summary, I think the things I like the most about my job are probably venture capital, doing the private equity deal, dealing with Apollo and KKR. I speak at a lot of their annual meetings, and in fact, Apollo has an annual meeting down in Miami next week, Wednesday, Thursday. And so that's what I love to do. It's still that my boss, the CEO, loves for me to do M&A, and I just did 2 transactions. One at the end of September was $1 billion. One on Monday, which was $2 billion, and that's kind of my bread and butter. Mm-hmm. So I like that the least. They like that the most. I like everything else more than that. So.
Great. That's fascinating. And so again, sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. And it sounds like the late 90s was the right time for you to get into the energy space. And it's been really, you've been hugely successful there. So the theme of the conference is really about disruptive technologies. And often when folks think about that in the energy space right now, they're thinking about decarbonization particularly of the electricity sector, which seems like it's right in NextEra's wheelhouse. So what are the sort of breakthrough technologies or key strategies that NextEra is looking at in that decarbonization of electricity space?
Yeah, so the core of it is really, we were a first mover in wind. We've been doing it for about 25, 30 years. And so we have huge market share in the wind sector. When we report, we kind of say it's 20%, but for the customers that we target, it's probably 40, 50%. We are very focused as a company, whether it's wind or solar or storage. So we're number 1 in wind, number 1 in solar, number 1 in storage. If we were a country, we would be like 7th or 8th in terms of renewables by country. So we are extremely focused on new technologies that may help us to do our business at a lower cost. So, for example, wind, solar, and storage is about 20% of electricity generation today. We expect, assuming, I know this is a future question of yours, assuming that the IRA stays in place, we expect that number to get to 60, 70% in the 2040 timeframe. And so we have been very focused on how can we build more wind, more solar at lower cost. And so when I started here at the company about 11 years ago, when you looked at the footprint of the number of people that we had covering a wind site or a solar site, that has been reduced tremendously because we've invested in technology. So for example, we have drones that fly a line, because a lot of times when you're going out, when there's a problem, you send someone out and they're just looking for something that's visually doesn't look right. And so you can do that with drone. We're doing more imaging technology and those types of technologies. The other thing we're looking at is to try to automate the construction process on site. I mean, we do tons and tons of renewables on an annual basis. And during the construction phase, we have a lot of people on site. As I mentioned, operational, we have like 1 or 2 employees that can cover a large region because we're doing it remotely. We're doing it with drones. We have a central control center of command. And so what we're working on now is how do we automate the construction process? How can we get fewer people as part of that construction cycle? So that's a big part generally. The other thing that we're looking at from a technologies perspective, not so much with wind, but much more with solar and storage, is you all may have seen that because of the tremendous demand for renewables, it's been driving up the prices of raw materials. So lithium, other kind of rare earth metals have been doubled, tripled in price. And so we have, in a lot of our investments, we're looking at, can we build new batteries without relying on those rare earth materials? Same thing in solar. The price of PV panel, solar panel, has gone through the roof. We've actually come across 1 or 2 technologies that might allow us not to continue to use PV solar panels in a much more efficient basis. So, and that is all in addition to trying to onshore all of our supply. So some of you may know that the cost of materials for wind, for solar, for storage are much more expensive in the U.S. than outside of the U.S. So we, like a lot of other companies, unfortunately, we go to the Middle East, we go to Asia. And so with in the recent kind of 5 to 7 year time frame, there's been a much more of a drumbeat in the federal government for people to bring those jobs back to the U.S. And so up until last year, they were kind of doing it with a stick. They were putting tariffs on imports of materials. And with the IRA, they also have a carrot. So they say, if you build in the U.S., we will actually allow you to have a tax credit. But notwithstanding the fact that there are tariffs from certain countries to import, and there's credits for building in the U.S., it's still more economic to export, to import from outside of the U.S. So we're very focused on how can we fully manufacture cost effectively in the U.S. How can we drive our costs down of construction for our renewable facilities, and then the operations we've been working on a pretty continual basis.
Great. Really fascinating stuff, and interesting contrast between the incentives to sort of bring jobs back and also the financial incentives to be lowering costs, which result in automation and use of technologies that reduce labor. So really interesting tensions there. So when we talked last week before this, we talked about how while we might first think about disruption in electricity and decarbonization, it's not just about that. That there's actually really a lot of interesting action in what we tend to describe as hard to decarbonize industries, cement, steel, other things. And so, what is NextEra looking at strategically in those industries?
Yeah. So if you go back and look at our June investor presentation last year, we intentionally said that we want to play a role in the decarbonization of the entire U.S. economy, because we have been playing a significant role in the decarbonization of the electricity sector. And we want it to be a lot more broad than that, because almost every industrial process it uses energy, and it's mostly fossil. So we've been looking at a number of really interesting technologies that we think can allow us to decarbonize other areas outside of the electricity sector. So for example, we invested in a company called Monolith. They're based in Nebraska. They make a material that's called carbon black, which is used for car tires. And we, like everyone else, has been looking at the various technologies of electric vehicles. You know, the transition from fossil fuel vehicles to natural gas vehicles, renewable natural gas vehicles, hydrogen vehicles. But the thing I love about Monolith is no matter what technology you're using to power the car, you need tires. So it was something that I was really interested in. And so right now they use fossil fuels to make their carbon black. It's a soot material that you actually use for the rubber for the car tire. And they have a pretty innovative way to use renewable energy. Combination, unfortunately, is a little bit of natural gas in the process, but to make the same material. And so we made an investment in them, because not only can you therefore make car tires in a much more decarbonized fashion, they also make a byproduct of ammonia. So hydrogen is used for ammonia. And so we're really excited about that. Another company we invested in a couple of years ago is called Infinium. They're based in Texas. And Infinium is trying to make green diesel, which is also really cool, right? You think about when you go to the gas station and you see the diesel there, it's like a fossil. And so you all may know that whether it's gasoline or diesel fuel, it's made up of a combination of carbon and hydrogen. And so what this company, Infinium, is doing, they are capturing carbon dioxide that's harmful for the air, and they're taking that carbon dioxide through a process to take the oxygen out. And so now you're left with carbon. And so we are building about 400 to 500 megawatts of renewables near their site in Texas to make hydrogen. So now I've stripped out the oxygen. I now have carbon. I use renewable energy to make the hydrogen, and I can go through a process of making green diesel fuel. And so we are very focused on green diesel fuel, sustainable aviation fuels, and the other thing that we're really excited about is, in addition to renewable natural gas, synthetic natural gas. So again, natural gas is a combination of carbon and hydrogen, and just like you can take carbon dioxide, take the oxygen out of the air, and be left with carbon, and combine it with the hydrogen to make diesel. Natural gas is CH4, so it's just straight methane. And so we are, for our electric business down in the state of Florida, which we are 70% of the state of Florida, we rely 70% on natural gas. We want to get off of that reliance, but it's not easy, because we're looking at hydrogen gas, and there's two main problems with hydrogen gas. One, it's like 3 times as expensive as natural gas. But more importantly, even if you could produce it at precisely the same cost, how do you get it to the facility? And because almost all of the pipelines in this country are natural gas pipelines, and if you're an environmentalist and there's a discussion about building a new pipeline, you don't care whether there's water going through the pipeline or natural gas going through the pipeline or hydrogen going through the pipeline. It's still, what is it doing to the forest? What is it doing to the rivers? What is it doing to the birds and bats and bees? And so it's not easy to build hydrogen gas pipelines in support of running our existing power plants on hydrogen gas versus natural gas. And so we're doing three things that I think are really interesting to use our existing billions of dollars of investment that we've made in natural gas facilities. One is we're looking at renewable natural gas, right? And so most of you, I assume, know what that is. That is, it's coming from trash, we call it dairy. It's not really dairy, but we call it dairy. And taking the natural gas out of that, processing it, and you can use that to run your natural gas facilities. Now, to put it in context, the amount of renewable natural gas that comes off of waste and dairy across the U.S., entire amount of production is only enough to run maybe 2 or 3 of our power plants. And so it's a very small part of the potential supply. And so that's why we're excited about synthetic natural gas, because we think there's a fair amount of carbon dioxide to capture. We obviously want to build renewables to make hydrogen, and we're hoping that synthetic natural gas can be economic and plentiful for our existing natural gas plants. Now, if we can't get there, we made an investment in a company called Safeguard that has a really interesting way to line an existing natural gas pipeline to allow hydrogen gas to run through it in a cost-effective way. And so we're actually doing pilots for that in the state of Florida. So we are, when we started 25 years ago, we were running on coal and oil. We have reduced to zero our usage of coal and oil as of 2020, but we're not going to stop there, right? So we want to, in the next 20 years, fully reduce the natural gas, but we have to do it economically. I can't go to a customer and say, hey, this is green. I know it's double the cost, but it's green. Our CEO says that every customer, the conversation is 2 greens. If I can't tell you I'm going to save you money, you don't really care that it's green. And that may not be the case for every electricity customer, but I'll tell you, if you are, and hydrogen is used today for a number of industrial processes. And the cost of hydrogen is like $1.50 to $2 a kilogram. We decided about 5 years ago that we wanted to try and make green hydrogen for our industrial customers. They were very receptive to it. And we said, oh, you know what? Instead of $1.50 to $2, how about $6? They said, how about no? So that is why about 5 years ago, we spent years and years working the IRA bill to get a tax credit in for hydrogen to make green hydrogen economic with gray hydrogen and with the other forms of hydrogen. And to no surprise, we started signing up customers to take green hydrogen last year. So it is a combination of focus on new technologies, a combination of focusing on supportive regulatory policies, not only at the state level, but also on the federal level, but also this focus on supply chain. It's a tremendous focus because our supplies come from everywhere.
Mm. Well, this leads nicely into the next question, which is about the Inflation Reduction Act. Huge change, external change to the business landscape in this space. And I'm curious, what the overall impact of the IRA is on strategy for NextEra. Is it, because of the tax credits, we're going to be able to do more faster, but sort of the same things we were already doing? Or is it actually enabling or encouraging investment in completely new directions?
Yeah, it's it's interesting. It's a really complicated question because prior to the IRA, thank you for the time check. Prior to the IRA, we had tax credits expiring every few years for wind and solar. So our former CEO used to always say, he says, I love this. You know why I love it? Because the tax credits are expiring every few years. No one wants to get into the business because they don't know whether they can continue. And two, he said, I can have a going out of business sale every 2 to 3 years, or like these tax credits are expiring. So you guys may not remember this, but we had, as part of the Obama Investment Recovery Act, there was a long-term extension of tax credits to 2016. And we started building more and more and more and more renewables. And then the Republicans in 2015, December 2015, wanted to export oil for the first time. And the Democrats said, well, if you're going to do that, I want another long-term extension of the tax credit. So they extended them back out to 2023. So guess what? What do you think our customers did for people that wanted renewables in 2017? They were like, you know what? I can wait. I got time. And so my point is that the passage of the IRA, so the Obama bill was about 7 years, the Trump bill was about 7 years. Our estimate of the IRA is 23 years, because it's a combination of two things. One is it's the later of 2032, and without getting into too technical, 2032 is really 2036, or when the U.S. Reduces its carbon emissions by 75%. We estimate that's like 2045, somewhere between 2045 and 2050. And so our customers now are like, okay, there's no longer a going out of business sale. I can take a little bit more of a wait and see. And so we actually, that coupled with the fact that we had all of this tariffs, we actually had a slowdown in renewables last year, come back a little bit this year. And we expect a significant ramp up in the back half of this decade. Now, renewables is like, it goes up and down, but I'll tell you, I started in 2012, we were doing 1,500 megawatts a year of renewables. We're doing 2,000 a quarter. Our goal is to go by 2025 to 26 to a gigawatt a month. So when we talk to suppliers and they hear our numbers, they're like, oh my God.
That's great. We just have a couple minutes left, and I thought we might take this opportunity, since we've got a room, not all of them are students, but many of them are MBA and other professional students from across Duke's campus, and perhaps you just have some words of advice for them as they're launching their career.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I was listening to the prior gentleman, and I was saying to myself, if I were sitting in your shoes, I just want to know how to get a job, have a successful career. So I probably bored you with more details than you care to know. But I think as it pertains to your career, this is probably better than me giving you or responding to any specific question on NextEra or renewables and all of that good stuff. Is it's really important that you, I know this all sounds like cliche, but you find something that, people always say, find when you love what you're doing and you're not working. I'm saying something slightly different. Find something that you're so fascinated by that you want to work. And when I was on Wall Street, I probably worked 120 to 130 hours a week. And in fact, and this is like, again, I'm going to do this in a bridge fashion. The reason why I got that first energy project, out of 13 first-year associates, I had 128 hours on my sheet. This was back before there was Blackberries and iPhones and working from home. And I said, and the staffer comes to me and she goes, you're going to have to take this new project. Of the 13 first years, you have the lowest amount of hours for the week. And I said, that can't be possible. So I said, go back to all of them and double check that they have real projects that are more, and it's like I said, we're all there. So you can't like put hours, and staffer's there because the staffer's a banker. And she went around for 2 days, and she came back and she said, I confirm that you have the least amount of hours. So I took the project. But my point is that when I started on Wall Street, I thought it was like the most important thing that I could ever do. Like, I thought I was going to learn so much, and I was like, look at these MDs and partners, they're so smart. And when you get to be like 8, 9 years in, you're like, okay, these guys don't know that much. Seriously. And so I actually figured out why they call people rainmakers, right? You guys probably heard that term, rainmakers. And it's because it's not that they know a ton, it's the relationships they have. So we had a guy at B of A who was the son of a guy who owns the Mets. Like, think about the relationships that causes you to have. And so you have a group of people within these banks who can get business, but then they need people to do the work. And so fortunately for me, when I started, I thought it was so for like 7 or 8 years, I was working like 125, 130. And I didn't have a life. I literally get home at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I get back up and get back at 7. But my point is, I had such passion for what I was doing. I learned so much. Now I'm almost 57 years old. I am not nearly as ambitious as I was back then. And so I usually sift through and figure out the quick, what do I need to do to get to an answer, whereas back then I wanted to do anything and everything. Now, the great thing about the 8 years of working 130 hours, I tell people all the time, you don't measure experience in years, you measure it in hours. We measured it in hours. You could take someone in New York at the same bank as in LA, and 5 years later, this person will have 2 to 3 times more experience. And so I'm not tooting my horn, but I am considered to be extremely good at what I do, but it has nothing to do with what I'm doing now. It's all the work I did before. So I tell people all the time, because this is TMI, and I'm going to bring it to a close, but my mom has dementia. My dad died last year. And so I think a lot about, like, as you get older, your mental decline. Like, you ever go to the grocery store and you see like a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, they're picking at everything. They're just curious. And somewhere between that 2-year-old and me is you all. And so what I'm saying is, find your passion, learn your craft. If you put your time in, no one can touch you. I am a perfect example of that, because my parents didn't even go to, they didn't make it to high school because they were sharecroppers, and you guys may or may not know what that is, but they didn't even get paid a salary. They were working on a farm in South Carolina. And when my dad got to 8th grade, he found out in Florida, you could actually work and people would give you money. He was fascinated by that. And so he left. And so my point is, like, I came from extremely modest means. I have 6 kids. My parents had 6 kids. And the only difference between all of us was, did we get a degree or not get a degree, and then we put our time in. So if you find something that you love, so it almost feels like you're not working, and you put your time in and take advantage of the fact that you're somewhere between me and that 2-year-old, and you're gonna absorb things like a sponge, when you get to be my age, you're gonna know a lot of stuff.
Thank you so much for that. And please join me in thanking Mark for joining us today and for his insights.